and available shortly after we wrap up today. For those of you not familiar with IARPC, we are the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, and the collaboration site brings together academics, federal agencies, nonprofits, industry, and international partners to advance the 5-year Arctic Research Plan. We're currently soliciting input on the content and format for the next Arctic Research Plan, which will run from 2022 to 2026. You can learn more about this process by visiting the link in the chat or visiting iarpiccollaborations.org. With that, I'd like to introduce Kate Ruck, a contractor at the Office of Polar Programs, who will say a few words about today's webinar and introduce the program officers. So with that, over to you, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. So just so folks know, we're going to move through a couple of slides, and then we're going to devote most of this time to questions and answers with NSF staff. So after we move through the slides, if you guys have questions, you can submit them through voice or chat, or you can PM me if you don't want to ask a question in a public space. And we'll be monitoring both places and be fielding questions in the Q&A session. So just to remind everybody about Zoom, I have a feeling we're all pretty used to it by now. The Zoom controls are on the bottom left. You have the mute, unmute to kind of control your video and your audio. And then for the participants, and that's where you can see yourself and you can rename yourself to have your full name or have it be showing whatever you want it to be. That chat button is there, is where you can either PM any individual in this meeting or do it to the whole group. And so the way you can control how you see everybody is gallery view allows you to see the webcams of other online participants. The speaker view only allows you to see the person that's talking. And you switch between those views in the top right. And then you may turn on your video or mic at any time. However, we ask that you keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking to help prevent disruptions and background noise. And then for folks that are joining the meeting audio by phone only, you can unmute and mute yourself by pressing *6 or whatever function your phone allows for that. And so I'll be passing this off to Roberto Delgado to move through what we'll be discussing today.
Thanks, Kate, and welcome everyone again. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever the case we find you today. We just want to take a few minutes in this hour to go over some brief discussion of the guidance that we have so far, but really allow the majority of the hour to be available for questions and answers with our staff. So a few things to remember as we go through, and I'll remind you again. And so will Jen Mercer, who's going to help me co-lead the initial remarks. We have a landing page at nsf.gov/coronavirus, which provides regular updates on detailed information on NSF guidance. And you should check that regularly and frequently for any updates. As I think Kelly said, this presentation will be posted afterwards. Here we have the NSF website, the OPP page, but I believe also on IARPC, or Kelly can correct me if I'm mistaken. And always, when in doubt, if you aren't clear on some of the information and guidance that you do come across from NSF, your program officer, your managing program officer really is your #1 resource. Can you have your next slide, please? So for today, we have great participation from the section of Arctic Sciences and the Office of Polar Programs, our section head Simon Stevenson, as well as program officers from all the different programs, Arctic System Science, Arctic Social Science, Arctic Observing Network, Arctic Natural Sciences. And we also have the honor of our grant specialist, Angela Turner, who is also available to answer questions related to budget or financial issues. Next slide, please. So as I alluded to at the beginning, NSF has several different sources of information that are updated regularly and should be checked frequently as you continue to make decisions and planning for your research throughout the course of this year and as we respond and deal with the pandemic. So again, the first primary website landing page is the nsf.gov/coronavirus page, which provides the overall foundation's guidance. And then if you want more detailed guidance from Office of Polar Programs on our page, we also have, again, more directed information, particularly with folks who require fieldwork support, logistical support, and additional sorts of information. So if any of this information or any of the specific questions that you have are not answered on those general guidance pages, again, I urge you strongly to email or call your managing program officer, who will be able to address or at least identify individuals to help answer your questions. So we've already begun over the past several weeks really to reach out to different research teams about their proposed fieldwork for the summer. At this point, we are encouraging delays given the current conditions out there. But again, we are evaluating on a regular basis, and specific projects may have different contexts and concerns. May I have the next slide, please? So before I hand it off to Jen Mercer, the thing that we really want to emphasize is that we are here for you. NSF remains open for business, as the slide indicates. And for those of you who are just on phone, I'll say that all NSF staff, program officers, grant specialists, and communications folks are on duty and available to answer your questions and hear your concerns. We are in the middle of reviewing proposals and managing review panels to advance the NSF mission. And just as a reminder, for those of you who aren't familiar, Arctic Sciences does not have any proposal deadline, doesn't have any deadlines for proposal submissions, and are continuing to welcome submissions at this time. As I mentioned earlier, we are continuing to assess the impacts of COVID-19 on the 2020 and potentially the 2021 Arctic field season. And the important thing is, again, to communicate consistently and clearly, both ways, in terms of what your plans are and what our guidance is to you. So with that, I'll ask for the next slide and then hand it over to Jen Mercer, who will say a little bit more about what the guidance is on field logistics and other aspects. Thanks.
Thanks, Roberto. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Mercer. I'm a program officer in Arctic Sciences and Arctic Research Support and Logistics within the Office of Polar Programs. So I think many of you are aware or are already experiencing the fact that our Arctic stations, as well as just many Arctic locations, villages, towns, military bases, have very limited entry and reduced operations. Travel is limited to critical personnel. Often there are significant quarantine requirements, and we expect those things to remain in effect until those precautions can be lifted, or we can change the procedures in some way but maintain safety. So keep in mind that not only is the travel limited to research stations, but there are travel restrictions in play that affect everyone from your home institutions, states that you may be traveling into or from, nations that you may be traveling into, and even travel restrictions imposed by the Department of Defense in the case of the flights to Greenland. So we do have a reduced capacity to support science in this 2020-2021 field season, and we are reevaluating plans and schedules regularly. That's taking a significant portion of our time each week now, but reevaluating plans and activities that are either currently scheduled or were proposed to be occurring this year. And one thing for those who did have or are still maybe holding out hope for field research in Greenland this year, we do want to note that IASI, which is a small Greenlandic agency or firm in the capital of Greenland, in Nuuk, they do have capacity to support field research. We can get you that information, but they've reached out. We've had discussions with them, and we do encourage people to think about potentially working with IASI to help maintain their observations or service instruments in Greenland. And you can work with them, contact them to define what services they might be able to provide for your project and what those costs would be. We expect continuation of significant disruptions to travel routes and reduced services from our support partners for the US across the Arctic. And we continue to reach out to our stakeholders as we, all of the Arctic stakeholders, as we look for options and to keep things running. So I think by and large, most projects that were scheduled to occur through June are either canceled, deferred, delayed, moved to next year, moved to the fall. There's not much left on the schedule, and we're actively having discussions with those that are. For the rest of the projects that haven't yet made decisions about late summer and fall field work, we hope that we'll have a better idea of the situation, and decisions can be made for all of those, as well as for our stations by the end of May. And our primary goal remains to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in the Arctic between our research community and into the Arctic communities. So that's really important to us. And we hope that you'll work with us to maintain that expectation. Next slide, Kate. Okay, so this is for our current awardees. This is both for your grants and your logistics support. We are committed to providing the greatest available flexibility that we can to support your health and safety and your work. So while we want to maintain the health of our research community and the health of the Arctic communities, we also want your project to continue to be successful. So there is flexibility in spending on your awards for salaries. There's flexibility for reporting, charging canceled travel, procurement requirements, close out of your projects, things like that. And that's why we have this great group of people here on the call today to answer questions about anything you might have. And then we would encourage you, as Roberto said, we're here for you. We're working every day, so to reach out to us individually and discuss any of your concerns. That said, make sure that you document everything. We are also doing that with our own stuff. We're documenting every single thing on this because, we have to, I think eventually we're gonna have to understand the true impacts on the Arctic research program. So your institutions need to maintain appropriate records and cost documentation. And again, there's the link to the coronavirus website at NSF. Next slide, Kate. Okay, and then this is for you to check some things. So we do encourage you to log into research.gov and check your awards, check your report due dates, check your project end dates, and find out who your managing program officer is for each of your grants. That can change sometimes. As you know, we have permanent federal employees that are program officers, and we have rotators. So sometimes your managing program officer has changed. Make sure you know who your current program officer is and what the dates are for your awards. Check your balances, your cost balances, and then make plans as best as you can for the next few months. So if you see needs for, if you see issues with any of these things, and including a need for supplemental funding to accomplish the original goals, then that's, we would encourage you to have a conversation with your program officer to reach out to us. And I think then just the next slide. Okay, so that brings us to the topic of no-cost extensions, salaries, and closeout dates. So for no-cost extensions, usually there are two no-cost extensions. Well, there always are two no-cost extensions on any award. The first one, though, is a grantee-approved extension, and that should be utilized prior to requesting an NSF-approved extension. That's pretty easy for you as the PI to get the ball rolling on that. Your organization's grants office can simply just has to inform NSF and send a notification through research.gov. And then the second one is a program officer approved no cost extension, and that comes after the first one. So you'll have to discuss that and negotiate a second one if you're in that situation with your program officer. But again, we are working to provide really great flexibility. A few notes on salaries. So award recipients are authorized to continue to charge salaries, stipends, and benefits to your currently active NSF awards. If you anticipate a shortfall, then you should talk to your program officer to discuss the situation and what you're anticipating. And again, maintain records and cost documentation. As far as award closeout, NSF has extended the closeout period for awards that ended between November 30th last year and April 30th this year to 180 days. So those are just some general announcements. And I think from there, we'll go to the next slide and I turn it back over to Kate. That's all a very high level kind of overview, and we expect to provide and answer more detailed questions, I think, here in the Q&A. Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to give some guidance to the Q&A. So you can either submit your question to the chat box. If you want to do it to the group, you can do that to everybody. If you want to do it in a more private way, you can send it just to me, and I'll be keeping an eye on that. If you are comfortable verbalizing your question to the whole group, you can use the raise hand icon, and we'll kind of be monitoring that to call on individuals and let them know. You can find the hand raise icon, I think, in that if you click on the participants. And so we'll be monitoring that. And then if you're calling in, you can unmute yourself by dialing *6. And we understand that there's no way for you guys that are on the phone to get in line. So you can just pipe up and say, like, hey, I have a question next. And we'll be keeping an eye on you guys too. And then once you do get called, please identify yourself and who you are directing the question to if you have a specific target in mind. And then I think as a parting word, I think everyone in this group is eager to work with you all. And I think we just want to say don't hesitate to contact anyone. So with that, it looks like Julie might be the first one up. So Julie, do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
Yes, and forgive me, I haven't looked at all of the details on the link that you provided with the background, so I'll make my question quick. You said document everything that you're doing, any changes you're having to make. At what point do changes in the use of your funding, how much change can you make before you really need to put something into research.gov for rebudgeting? So at what level do we need to really go in and rebudget officially, and to what extent can we just use our discretion and document? I don't know who could answer that better.
It might be Angela. I think there she is, off mute.
Hello.
Hello.
And you asked about documentation and rebudgeting. So let me just first to speak to the documentation. You do want to make sure that you're documenting, and as well as I want to emphasize that if you are working, you want to make sure that you're documenting. And this should actually be done through your sponsor research office, and they will be well aware when a rebudget request will need to come to NSF. And
Okay.
most rebudgeting requests, the grantee has authorization to do. But again, I want to emphasize, please check with your sponsor research office and your AOR.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have a question in the chat from Adrienne Rocha. He asks, if your project ends in April of 2021 and you request a no-cost extension, will you be able to request logistical support for the 2021 summer field season, May through September?
I can take the first crack at that one. If you had field work scheduled for this year and it's been canceled, or you're looking into what to do with field work for this year, then yes, I would encourage you to talk to your program officer about shifting that field work to next year, and you would need a no-cost extension then to extend the lifetime of your project. If your field work is all completed then the answer would be no. You wouldn't have additional field work allocated to you. But again, you should reach out to your program officer and your RSL program manager about your specific requirements and work that out with those two program officers. Does that answer your question, Adrienne? Okay, great. This is a lot of great awkward silence for 87 people.
Yeah, no questions yet. We actually have one right now from Rebecca.
Excellent.
So can you say what NSF is doing about testing for COVID and antibodies?
Renee, would you like to take that one?
Renee.
Sure. Hi, I'm Renee Crane. I'm a program manager with Arctic Research Support and Logistics, and I'm on detail as the acting section head for Polar Environment Safety and Health. We are currently working on being able to test asymptomatic people before they deploy to our field sites, for example, in Greenland. But as you know, that's been challenging. We were able to work with the Alfred Wegener Institute to test people before they deployed to Mosaic. But we do think that we'll come up with a solution for future deployments to areas like Summit Station in Greenland. But we think that we can do that for sort of our contract staff, but research teams are going to have to be looking for their own ways of testing their teams. So that's something we'll have to work on together in the go forward plan. Antibody testing, as you know, is not fully reliable yet, but that's something that we're keeping an eye on and another option to explore for determining people's eligibility more or less to go to remote regions or interact with communities. We know that we really don't want to be any sort of vector to the Arctic and certainly not to Arctic communities. And so that's our foremost priority. And the travel restrictions that different nations and the state of Alaska have put on travel are really helping to enable us to prevent people from going who might be carriers. And that's something that we want to support. We want to help make sure that people understand the travel restrictions where they're going. And we do hope that testing for COVID-19 and exposure through antibodies will be something we'll be able to add to our repertoire. Right now, what we're relying on is lengthy quarantine periods. Frank might have more to add as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we're also working with the UNOLS, the U.S. academic fleet, to determine how and when cruises can resume. There is a cruise by Sikuliak that's taking place right now, but under very restricted conditions. I think they only have 3 scientists on board, which was determined to be the minimum number that they could accomplish their research goals. And we're talking to our logistics contractor and contract vessel operators to try to determine the appropriate response and criteria for any activities that would take place through the contract supported mechanisms as well.
Great, thanks. Next question is from Catherine Lavelle. Could you comment in a general way on the Arctic program going forward, the future plans for awards?
Simon, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I'll take that. So we're thinking about how to obviously accommodate the COVID-19 change the way we do business, but in general we're working as we normally would. Our hope, our concept is that there'll be solutions with inoculations and the like in play soon, or towards the end of this year, next year, and Arctic research will go forward. So right now we're mindful of the current situation, but we're reviewing proposals as we normally would, and we're making awards basically with the concept that the people will be able to conduct research in 2021 and beyond. Other people should feel free to jump on that if they wish. Well, I'll just say one more thing, that for most of our logistics, we sort of buy it by the pound. With ships, it's a little different. There will be a sort of a knock-on effect. Things that were canceled from this year will presumably flow into next year. Frank has a way of, finding ships, which we never knew about. But generally, there's going to be a limit to that. So there could be implications to things that we funded currently that I planned for 2021 that might be pushed later because of impacts from 2020.
Yeah, there's another question here that kind of feels, I think it piggybacks on this, and I think you may have already answered it, but maybe we can address it a little bit more specifically too. So how far into the future is NSF thinking in terms of proposing future Arctic fieldwork, i.e. will proposals with Arctic fieldwork that may be impacted by COVID in the future be less competitive?
Frank wants to go.
Yeah,
I'm going to let Frank speak.
I'll take a crack at part of that. I mean, in terms of field work that's related to funded projects right now, especially in Alaska, we're looking a couple months out. And what we're thinking about is the proposed research in compliance with the governor's health and travel mandates, which are still fairly restrictive. They involve, you can't have more than one family members in a vehicle. So if you have people coming from different households, they can't be in a vehicle together. There are also a lot of issues related to stations like Toolik Field Station, which right now is closed to researchers till July 1st. And we're working with the folks at UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks, and the Institute of Arctic Biology to continue to evaluate the issues involved. And at this point, I don't believe that they're prepared to make any judgment about whether they can open in July until at least the end of May. And then following on to that, the decision to when or if they may be able to open later in the summer. So that's just more of a focus on this year that I'd like to get across to people.
I'll piggyback on what Frank was saying there, and I think to directly answer your question, I do not think that proposals with Arctic field work that could be affected by COVID-19 in the future, so in the out years, 2021 and beyond, I do not think they would be less competitive. That's not part of the merit review process. However, I would say that if there's clearly ongoing effects, that a mitigation plan would need to be part of your field logistics plan, and going into villages and how a project aims to prevent the spread of COVID if this continues on for the next couple of years. So you'd work that with the logistics provider, with our contractor, or have direct conversations with one of the RSL program officers on how you might do that.
Or if jumping on, or conversations with the communities that you might impact. So, to work it out with local authorities local villages, so that you're not, that your plan is acceptable to them, or it's a co-plan. But the bottom line is Jennifer's answer is the correct answer. I don't see that fieldwork proposed now would be considered less competitive. Frankly, because there's so much we don't know, and we're going to have to learn with the community how we can implement field work in the next few years.
Okay. Next question comes from Lawrence Padman. He works at a small nonprofit funded entirely by NSF and NASA. So if the operating or indirect costs increase due to stay-at-home orders, is there a way to recoup by grant augmentations, or must it come out of the funds already committed to direct cost activities?
That might be a question for Angela regarding indirect rates.
And hi, this is Angela. In regards to the indirect cost rate, currently the policy still stands. The institution's current rate that was awarded at the time of award would be applicable. The only other thing that comes to mind would be if a supplement would be possible. And so I'm going to pass it to a program officer to assist with the supplement, if it's possible to do a supplement request.
So it's always
Simon, are you jumping in there?
Oh,
Or Mark?
No,
Okay,
I'm going to let Mark jump in.
Good.
Mark, go for it.
no, I was just going to say, if you're thinking about a supplement, give us a call. We'll discuss it with you. We know that, especially with respect to your graduate students, your postdocs, people were expecting to graduate and people were expecting to get jobs. So if you have issues where you're thinking about supplements, contact your program officer and talk it through and describe the situation. And I think that's really what to do in that situation.
So I'm going to say what he said, but I will just add this, that what's really unusual about this year is the scale of the potential requests for supplements. Every year we have people who change plans for a variety of reasons, because nature has a way of changing Arctic field plans. There's always issues at home with family, or parents, or whatever, and there's people go out and play soccer and then break their arms or whatever. There's always reasons why we change our planning. What's unusual about this year is that almost every project is changing their planning, but the rules basically apply, right? So we just have to work through the rules now, instead of with 3 or 4 projects, with maybe as much as 50, 60, 70, 80 projects, depending on what how people can adjust their plans.
Yeah. So Eric Loring had it was more of a point rather than a question, and I think Simon touched on it a little bit, but I think he highlights the point that that the community's view on research and engagement with research may have changed, and so when this is over, it'd be good for researchers to ensure that communities are comfortable with the given research project, and kind of revisit those conversations that might have happened pre-pandemic. So the next question is from Anna Schemper. If an institution gives approval for a field plan that is at odds with the state of Alaska mandates, will NSF step in, or will they defer to the institution's approval of the field work?
Frank.
Frank.
So I would say that we're looking very hard at this question, again, especially related to Alaska. I've talked to the Vice Chancellor for Research at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and he's shared with me that the entire University of Alaska system is trying to have coherent and uniform procedures for requesting and approving research, but the decisions are being made down at the dean's level in many cases. So we're going to review those projects, especially if they're getting support through the NSF logistics contract. And we're going to have to evaluate if it's against the law or against the existing mandate, then chances are it won't be approved. And we'll work with the PI to revise the plan or reschedule the activities. There's the other situation where funds are direct to grant, but they're still NSF funds, and I think that there is recourse if they're used inappropriately.
Yeah, I would follow that up with, we feel strongly about respecting the state of Alaska and even borough implemented restrictions on travel. And we're also looking to our federal agency colleagues who live and operate in Alaska and trying to understand what they're doing in terms of field work and looking at being consistent with the expectations and the norms that are related to scientific fieldwork in the state of Alaska.
Okay. Next question is from Jack Dibb. Does OPP Arctic or NSF in general have any heightened concern about including students in field research when such research becomes possible? His university is striving to enable local field research as much as possible, but is excluding involvement of students for projects that are further afield.
What was the second part of that question, Kate?
So his some individual universities are supporting local field research for students as much as possible, but are being less supportive of field work for students that involve travel.
Oh.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd be happy to sort of jump in generally on this. So again, NSF Standard Approaches that we make awards to the university, and the university is responsible for the execution of the award, for the institution, usually a university. Do we have a heightened concern? Not exactly a heightened concern for the students in this, but very occasionally, program officers, it gets flagged by program officers, say, is this a good idea? But generally speaking, if you and the institution feel that the students are going to be safe in the field, we're not going to have any additional concerns over that. Are we going to push an institution to make them take students to the field? Absolutely not. That's really an institutional decision. So I think there's the potential here of coming up with approaches that allow folks to take students into the field, and that everybody in that process is safe, certainly well informed, so that folks won't go into the field and not understand the risks in any field work, let alone in this situation. Maybe others want to jump in.
I'll just add that one of the considerations is the limited capabilities for evacuation or removal from the field, and especially in very remote areas. And that's something we're definitely looking at hard to ensure that there are plans, written plans, that all the stakeholders, including vendors or contract personnel, are signing off on.
Next question is from Scott Schnur. Are there any indications from the government of Greenland that their quarantine rules, 14 days of isolation, may be changing anytime soon? People are interested in Greenland Science Week in November and wondering how to plan travel.
So right now, Greenland is closed to international travelers entering Greenland unless you have special permission. And you have to submit a plan. So the 14 days of isolation is was for Greenlanders that were going back in, I think. We do think that that will happen when they do open up their borders to international travel, that there will be some length of time for quarantine, but we don't yet fully know what that means and if they'll be excluding certain groups of travels or types of activities or not. We're watching that closely. But you're asking about Greenland Science Week in November. I don't know of any organization that's thinking as far ahead as November right now in a detailed sense, just because we're all reacting to the immediate complications and the summer plans. That said, if I had a crystal ball, I would guess that either the situation will have changed drastically enough that they can hold the meeting in person without 14-day quarantines, or they'll move it to an online meeting as all spring meetings have done so already, and they won't allow people into Greenland. For anyone who's not aware, I think most people are probably pretty aware of this, but Greenland did have 11 confirmed cases of COVID-19. All 11 cases were in Nuuk. All 11 cases have recovered. And when they did have positive cases in Nuuk, they closed down all travel, so they couldn't travel between villages either. Since those 11 cases have recovered and there have been no new cases, they can now travel between villages, but they're very concerned about having COVID-19 re-enter Greenland. So I would expect that the only way that meeting would go forward in person would be if it's very low risk.
Great, thanks, Jen. Next question is from Jack Dim. Is it correct that Alaska has designated research as essential recently, subject to a range of restrictions, of course? Good, Frank.
So there was a request from the University of Alaska Chancellor to the governor's office to ask that specific question. And it was answered, but with some very specific components. And those are that the researcher requesting fieldwork needs to provide a justification addressing why the work cannot be accomplished remotely and why it needs to be accomplished now. They need to provide a detailed safety plan explaining how any required travel would comply with the Alaska state health mandates. And they need to, 3, explain how the work will comply with social distancing requirements and explain how the work can be conducted without putting anyone at risk. It's important to remember that the governor's health mandates 11 and 12 are still in place and must be observed, and that there's still a ban on travel to rural communities. So within that context, there's a process for requesting research activities that are evaluated by the individual institution within the University of Alaska system. We have not been able to confirm that this applies to any other university in Alaska. I think they have to, and there's other requirements that are incorporated in the governor's health mandates that must be met as well. And I don't know if that letter is public or not, but we can look into that.
Thanks, Frank. So that's all the questions I currently have in the chat. So if people want to think of some. Well, you still have 15 minutes of our undivided attention. Oh, here we go. From Rachel Daniel, provided the history of pandemics on Indigenous peoples in Alaska, it seems important to consider what federally recognized tribes themselves as governments consider as essential. In addition to the state of Alaska, federally recognized tribes and regional nonprofits mandates should also be considered. I think it was more of a statement.
Thank you, Rachel. And I think if we didn't say it explicitly, that's definitely in our thinking, that we respect the communities and the tribes' ability to say who should come in. And, you know, we've heard stories about a plane lands and it's greeted with hostility from local people because they don't know who's on it or what they want to do. And so we recognize we're living in a time of tremendous uncertainty, and it's in the historical context of some really horrific events. And so I think all of us are aware of that, and the program officers and those of us working with projects going to the field are aware and, you know, utilizing that information and knowledge to make decisions. And I appreciate you bringing it to the group. I don't know if Colleen or Erica have other specific things they might want to add, or other program officers.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. I am just about to pop the statement from Inuit Teparik Kanatami in the chat box too, which provides some really good information from ITK on why this is really important to consider as well.
This is Erica. I can also refer folks to the recent IASI Guidelines, the International Association of Arctic Social Sciences, and they have promulgated a set of basic decision-making tools that prioritize basically local communities for any investigators who are trying to make decisions about whether to go into the field. You know, first off is consider your possible impacts on a local community. And if you think that you might go in anyway, contact that local community. You know, that's basic respect for the folks that we conduct research with. I'll pop that into the chat as well. Actually, Kelly already got it. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah,
And I just wanted to add really quickly that on the IARPIC Collaborations website, we'll be compiling kind of a list of these statements under the COVID-19 topic tag, so you can refer to them later.
Yeah, and then also as people think of questions, I think in terms of communications, we'll be collating some of these questions, I think, into an FAQ. I think the Antarctic side of the house is already working on that as well from their office hours last week and the week before. And then I think we're also considering making these kind of a regular planning some more in the future as things change.
Kate, I just wanted to reiterate too that we know every project, it has really different circumstances in terms of field work and your collaborations and students and soft money considerations and working with communities and things like that. And so that there's not going to be a one size fits all answer for each of the projects. And that's why, you know, a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago, whenever that was, time doesn't exist anymore. We reached out to you all separately to kind of make sure that you know that we as program officers are resources to you. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any concerns or ideas on how you would like to move forward. I just wanted to reiterate that point that we're here and happy to talk to you.
Yeah, and I'll also put my email on the chat. If people want to see maybe an office hour that is more focused on a specific topic in the coming weeks, you can email me with an idea related to that. And so that's something that we can discuss as a group as well.
And this is Sarah from IARPIC. I really want to thank all the NSF program managers. This was really excellent. And if people feel like similar presentations from other agencies, and I know they don't have as many extramural awardees, but if this would also be useful across other agencies, please let us know that.
Okay, I think we can give people 10 minutes of their day back if that sounds good to you guys. I just want to thank everyone for joining. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. Kate's information is in the email chat, and I will be sure to post that on the IARPIC webinars page as well. Thanks, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Laura, if she's still here. Yeah, hey, Laura. So Laura, USAP did theirs, I think 2 weeks ago, and I think there's more coming. So this is, IARPIC is an Arctic collaborations portal, and so we didn't really advertise those through the IARPIC website, and then it was actually done by NSF IT and advertised through those channels. Bev, maybe you could speak more to the USAP's plans for, I think, future office hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the Antarctic side of the house, we are absolutely planning on doing more office hours. I think we are looking towards the end of this month in the May 22nd, 23rd timeframe. Do keep an eye out. We will be advertising for that prior to that webinar. But the intention is to have more of them so we can keep this more open communication with the community going and alive.
Yeah, Bev, where do you guys push out those information? I know for OPP in general, we're working on creating a listserv so that all OPP grantees can be on one space. But right now, what do you guys mostly use? I know the Facebook page.
Yep. Absolutely. So it'll go on the Facebook page. It gets pushed out to a couple of different listservs. Cryolist is definitely one of them. I would have to check with Terry to see which other listservs that it goes out to, but definitely the Facebook page, and then that gets scrolled on the USAP webpage, I believe. So it should be listed there as well.
And then did you guys record the last ones? I know you're generating, so they'll be generating an FAQ that will be posted, but were the last sessions recorded or no?
They were not recorded, but you're correct. We'll definitely have an FAQ from those that'll be getting posted, and that hopefully that's more of like a living document that we can add to as more questions come up from the community and are captured. And that'll be posted on the website.
Okay. Great. All right. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Mike. Thank you.